Hey, I'm Hunter from Skill Thrive, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to take your Figma designs and start organizing all your styles and components into a design system. By doing this, you'll be able to keep consistency in your design, build new designs faster by using reusable components, and easily change styles across all your existing designs if needed. To demonstrate this process, I'm using a project I downloaded on Dribbble from the Slab Design Studio team. Be sure to check out their profile if you'd like to see more of their work. I'll link it in the description below. Also in the description, you'll find a link to skillthrive.com where you can download the course files, which include the original and the final Figma files. With that said, let's open the original Figma file and start converting it into an organized design system. And if we do Control G, we can turn on the layouts here, and we can see that the team that designed this with a 12-column system. You can see how everything sort of lines up. There's some stuff that looks like it's a little bit off, which we could fix. But overall, it looks pretty good. And we can also see on the right, we have some local styles that were already included in the original file. Now, it looks like there's just one text styles, but just by looking at this, you can see there's multiple different types of text styles just right here. The features is different. This is different. All this is different. So all those need to be individual text styles because they might be something we want to reuse in other components. Now you can also see that there are some color styles here, and we can actually organize these a little better and probably name them a little better as well. But really that's all there is as far as the local styles. There's no components here, and there's no styles for some of the effects. So like on this button, if you click this, you can see that the button has this drop shadow, but it's not a component. But we can actually make that into a style and then reuse that drop shadow and other buttons, for instance. So with all that said, let's go ahead and just start cleaning up some of the things here in our local styles. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the text styles. So while we're already here at the top, we can go ahead and start with this big font here and go ahead and add this to a text style. Now to do that, we want to come over here with the text selected and click on this four dot icon here. Click here to add that to our text styles. And what I want to do is I want to call this heading 1. And this is really important to call it heading 1 or have a convention that is similar to how you would think about it in your actual code. So for this example, heading 1 represents the H1 tag in our code. So that is going to make it very clear to a designer or developer that's looking at this Figma file that this is the design for the header 1. So let's go ahead and create that style. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and come up to this style. And I'm going to go ahead and just delete it. And I think the way we do that is by right-clicking and then saying delete style. Okay, so let's go ahead and select this and make sure it's on that heading 1 that we just created. All right, so the next thing we want to do is just move on to the next item here, which is this paragraph. And we could call this a couple different things. I think what I want to do is just give it a medium name and then have a normal style. So to do that, I can come over here again, add a new style and say medium / and then I'm just going to do normal because it's not a bold font. And the slash here is really important on how things are organized in our style. So if we have medium / normal or medium / bold, those two styles are going to be grouped under medium, which you'll see in just a second when we add that medium bold style. So let's go ahead and click here to create that style. And if you ever want to remove that style or make it where it's not connected to that style, all you need to do is come over here and click on this icon to unlink or detach that style. And that's good if you want to see what the font and stuff is, but you can always go in here into your local styles, click on this icon, and then see those same settings. All right, so let's go ahead and make sure we revert that and make sure that it's tied to that setting that we just created. And on here, on the Learn More, you can see that it's the same style, but this time the weight is heavy. So this would be a good case for calling this medium and then slash, and then bold or heavy as the next descriptor tag. So let's go ahead and click here, call this medium slash, let's do heavy. And now you can see what I was mentioning before, heavy and normal are now grouped underneath this medium indicator right here. And you'll see that as well for this small text that we're going to be creating up here. So now that we have that, let's come up to this style here. And on this request demo, we can see that it is 16 heavy. And then these are 16 medium, 16 heavy. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll call this one the text small styles. We'll give this one heavy, and the other ones we'll give a normal size. So let's go ahead and select that, click here, and we'll call this small slash and normal. And we'll go ahead and select these, make sure that they are on the normal as well. And on this one, we can go ahead and add a new style, call this small heavy. And let's go ahead and select this request a demo text and make sure that that is linked to the small heavy as well. All right. So now that all these are linked, and these should be linked as well, we can move on further down the page. And here is a good case for maybe like a heading 2 tag. So we can see that this is Helvetica 40, and this is Helvetica 40 as well. So this would be a good case for an H2. So let's go over and click on this icon again, and we'll call this heading 2. And we could actually group these if we wanted to. So if we wanted to come in and say heading /2, we could do that. And then that's going to give us that nice heading break. So let's go ahead and come up to this one, do heading 1. And let's go ahead and move this header to up beneath this one so it's a little closer and more organized. Okay, so now that we have that style defined, we can come down to this features and make sure that that is connected to that style. So that's going to be our heading 2. All right, so this one, if we select this, you can see that this is actually our medium normal style. So let's go ahead and select that. And it looks like this one's the same style, which it is. So we'll go ahead and connect that to the medium normal as well. All right, so these down here look like they'd be good candidates for a heading 3 tag. So let's go ahead and create a new heading here. Give this heading /3. And let's go ahead and connect all of these to that new style. And actually, while I was going through and connecting these, I'm just going to connect one. And the reason I'm doing that is essentially all these cards are essentially the same design, but just with a little bit of tweaks, right? So the animation's different, the colors are different, and this like little texture here is different. And then obviously the copy is different. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set the styles on 1, create that as a component later in the video, and then duplicate that 4 times, changing all the things I just listed. So this is a heading 3, so we got that already set. This looks like the small font, but this time it's actually thinner, so it's the book weight, so it's a little thinner than the normal. So let's come up here and add a new style, and this is going to be small, and we'll call this thin. Okay? And select this one. That is going to be our small heavy. And that looks like everything we need to do as far as this one. We won't worry about these for right now. All right, and we have this down here, but I'm actually going to leave these 2 components up to you, just because if I did these and then styled the footer, it would just be a lot longer video than it needs to be. So take what you learned designing the first 3 sections or following along with me, and then apply those to the last 2 sections at the bottom. So with that said, I'm just going to come up here and just minimize this so we can make sure we're just focused on the top 3 sections here. All right, so it looks like we went through and added all those text styles. The next thing we want to do is make sure that we have all the color styles here as well. So let's come in and select this one, and we can see that this is the 2 style, and we can go ahead and give that a better name. So let's do, come in here, and it looks like this one is darker than this one. And my darker colors, if they're similar, I like to make the darker one like dark 1, and then if it's another dark color, I'll give that like dark 2. So I might actually rename this instead of 2, give this dark/1, and then give this one dark/2. And just like with the text styles, by giving it that slash, we're grouping the darks together, and then the numbers that follow or the names that follow are going to be the actual name of the text styles. So if we move back here, you can see now that we have these 2 dark styles, and the rest of them are right here. Now these are, I'm just going to call these purple, pink, and green. So let's come in and change the names here. So let's do purple. All right, so by looking at this, I can tell that there are, other colors going on here. There's like this faded color, there's this blue that's not in there. So we're just gonna go through each layer and then make sure all the colors are tagged to a color style. So let's go ahead and start up at the top here with our text. So if we select this, we can see that each of these have a color style on it. The logo, we can add that to a pink. This is going to be the purple. Request a demo. All right, that has a color. This one doesn't, so let's go ahead and give that the purple. All right, the background, we actually never created this color. So with this selected, let's go ahead and add a color here. We'll call this one light 1. Okay. And while we have this background selected, actually, let's go ahead and add this effect of this drop shadow. So we toggle this on and off, you can see that effect. Let's add that as a local style as well. And it's very similar. We just click here and then here, and we could call this like button drop shadow 1. Okay. So that should take care of the button. And it actually looks like this entire page has a linear gradient on it. So let's go ahead and select it. We can see that linear gradient here. So let's go ahead and add that to our styles. So we can say gradient, and then that's going to be gradient light 1. Okay. All right, so it looks like we got the top done. Let's make sure this is connected. All right, so this needs to be connected to that light color. The purple is connected. Okay, we won't worry about the illustration because that would be separate from the web design. That'd be done in something like Illustrator. So we won't worry about that. We do want to make sure that this pink is the right style. Now it looks like they just took the pink that we already have as a style and just dropped the opacity down to 15%. So what we can do is we can select this, and let's go ahead and just add this as a pink style. So we'll call this pink/2. Another way I've seen people do it is like pink with the opacity percentage. So like pink 0.15 for 15%. But this for right now is fine. If I want to come back and change it, I'm capable of doing that if I decide naming it the other way makes more sense. All right, so let's check this text. All right, so this one is not connected, but it's the style that ends with 53, which I think is our dark 1. It is. So let's go ahead and connect that to our dark 1 style. And that one's dark 2. And then let's go ahead and make sure that dark 1's above. Make sure pink is beneath pink 1. And let's go ahead and move light up to the top as well. All right, so moving on to this features. So that needs to be on dark 1. This needs to be dark 1. And just like these, I'm not going to worry about these 3 because I'm going to come back and duplicate the component. And this one's good. And then this one needs to be connected to the purple. And also on these need to be white. So let's go ahead and connect that to light. I actually need to add all of these purples, this different shade of green, and then this blue. So let's come into the blue here. And we can see that this is, so they're setting the layer to a 10%. So let's add that to 100, or set that back to 100, and then add this blue color to our styles. So let's go ahead and come up here, give this just blue 1. Then what we can do is detach this, set this to 10%, and go ahead and add this as blue 2. Okay, and on this one, we can see that it's actually attached the color, but we want to detach it. Set this to 100, this to 10, and let's go ahead and add this to our purple 2. We should already have the pink 2 created, but we need to detach it and then set that back to 100. Okay. And then last, we have this green color. Again, detach, set the layer to 100, and set the opacity to the hex code to 10, and then add this to green/2. All right, so let's go ahead and just check out our styles here and move them around so they're organized. So purple needs to be under purple. We got pink, green, gradient. I'll move to the bottom, and then we have our blues. And we also have our button style. Now, there is one more thing I want to do, and that is a gradient, or excuse me, not a gradient, but a layout style. So let's come up to the top here, select this artboard and do Control-G, and that's going to turn on our layout grid. Now, I'm not really big on the rows here, so I'm just going to get rid of the grid and the rows and just keep the columns. And let's go ahead and add this as the 12 column layout. So we'll do the same thing here, add it, and we'll do desktop, or actually let's do 12 and then /desktop. And then create that style. So now if we, create a new artboard, let's go ahead and just duplicate this, for example, and pretend like this didn't have any grid on it. We can just come here, select it, and then select it here from our grid styles. Cool. So let's go ahead and delete that. All right, so that was a lot of work just to get the local styles down. But now we have our fonts more organized so we can reference them later in other designs. We have our colors set up, we have our effect styles starting to be organized, and we have our grid styles starting to be organized as well. So the next thing we want to do is we want to move on to the individual elements. Now in this video, I'm going to be using the concept of atomic design. And the idea of atomic design is actually pretty simple, and that's why I like to use it, because it's really easy to wrap your head around. The idea is that you start with these elements called atoms, which are your most basic UI elements. So think buttons, typography, colors, margins, links, things like that. And the next level up from that is going to be molecules. The molecules are made up of atoms. So these might be something like headers, or let's see, another example would be like navigation links. And a next level above that is what you call organisms. And organisms are made of a combination of molecules and atoms. So think of something like this entire feature section down here. This down here would be an organism. This header here would be a molecule. This card would be a molecule. But this link here, this action link, or this learn more, that would be a good example of an atom. So it's an element that is small, but we're reusing it in multiple places. So that's going to be a lot clearer here once we start doing this process. So let's go ahead now and start adding our atoms to some components. And the first thing I'm going to do is I want to come into this page here. Let's just go ahead and rename this to home page. And then we'll create a new page, if I actually can spell that. There we go. And on this one, we'll call this one atoms. And the atoms here, what we want to do is we want to first, let's go ahead and focus on the buttons. So we'll come into the button here, and we'll call this just button with, we can give it maybe like button icon would be a good name. So it's a button with an icon. And let's go ahead, and it's good practice just to make sure that these master components are organized. So we have, call to action, we have an arrow, we have the background. Okay, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and just bring this out. I don't really need that grouping. And with this selected, what I can do is right click and then say create component. You'll see that this icon changes to this like baseball diamonds. It has like 4 little squares in a diamond shape. And this signifies a master component. Now, you really don't want to leave this in your design. It's good practice to put this on another page that you can reference later. So in order to move this easily from the design to our atoms page, what I'm going to do is Command D to duplicate that. And now you can see this new icon shows up, which signifies that this is an instance of a master component. So we're going to keep that one there, then come down to our master component, Command X to cut that out, come back into our atoms, and then paste that here. And now we have this master component where we want it. And we could just leave it here, just floating in the, in this space. But a lot of people like to put it in artboards or frames and then have all their groupings of buttons and links and stuff like that in the same artboard. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to create an artboard here and just call this button. Then we'll move this in. And I like to give it some spacing, but keep in mind how we have this organized right now. So we have this button frame, and then inside it we have a button called button/icon. So if we come up to assets, that's where we're going to be able to see our local components. So if we come down and expand this, you can see that we have this group called buttons, which is the frame, and then button, and then we have it named button/icon. So let's go ahead and rename that. And we actually want to give this plural because we're going to have more than one button. And instead of repeating ourselves here, let's just give this button/icon. And now you can see that this is under just buttons and then icon. Just kind of like something I like to keep in mind when organizing this. I don't want to repeat the names too much. So this is just how I like to stay organized. All right, so we'll come back and clean some of this stuff up as far as like how it's positioned. But let's come back into our home page, and we have a couple more things here I want to add. I want to add this button and then this learn more down here. So let's come up to this learn more. Whoops. And let's go ahead and make sure that this learn more is organized. So we will give this a name of just medium. So for like a medium-sized button, give this call to action and call this background. So again, just being very descriptive of what these layers are. And here we can then go ahead and say create component, Command D to duplicate, Command X to remove the master component, come into our atoms, and then paste it into our buttons. So now you can see that we have these 2 components here, and we can go ahead and space these out. Let's do about, let's see, 40 pixels. And an easy way to like add some spacing that's even around this is using the new auto layout function in Figma. Now this isn't really what it's designed for, but it is kind of like a cool little workaround. So let's come up to auto layout. We'll give this 80, 80, and now these are all going to be 80 spaced out. And it's important to remove that auto layout. And there we go. Now we have our buttons starting to come together and be organized in our atoms page. All right, so the next thing we want to do while we're up here at the top is just go ahead and grab our logo, and we'll call this, instead of logo, we'll just give it a name of like a main. And the rest of those are fine. Go ahead and create a component here. Command D, cut out the master, come into our atoms, let's create a new frame, call this logos, and then paste in this here. And similar to that, let's go into our auto layout and give this 80, 80, and we'll go ahead and move this about, let's do 100 pixels from the buttons. All right, and let's go make sure that that is in here, organized. Okay, so we got buttons, logo, and main. Cool, so we have quick access to that now. And the next thing we want to do is we want to set a couple more things here. And one of them is going to be the card shapes. And what that is these like little textures back here. And we also want to set the feature illustration, which are these right here. And you can see when we select these that the size of these are a little different. So when I come across something like this with like icons or illustrations, what I do is I end up creating a frame. I find like the biggest width and height between all four. And then I set that to a frame. I put the illustration in it. And then I can use that frame to center all the illustrations. And then I can switch the instance of the illustration. So that might sound more complicated than it really is. But let's go ahead here and then see what the biggest width is. So that's 232. So I'm looking at this number, 232, 241. So 241 is biggest, 245. All right, so 245. Let's create a new frame here. Call this 245. And then now let's find the biggest height between all of these. So 211. All right, so 211. All right, and this frame is now going to act as kind of like a holder for the rest of these illustrations. So let's go ahead and give this just like 1 for illustration 1. Let's go ahead and rename this. I'm going to cut this out, zoom in here, and then paste it in. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and resize it so it's the max width and just kind of center it a little bit and give it some spacing. Now you can see that it's like hanging off a little bit. So this must have been like a PNG and then there must have been some weird export here. So don't worry too much about this. This really won't matter because we're going to be using this frame as like a kind of like a crop. So just go ahead and center this the best you can. Just going to kind of eyeball it here. Okay, and what I want to do now is go ahead and make this a component. So we'll go ahead and say create component, Command X to cut that out, come back into my atoms, create a new frame here. We'll call this one feature illustrations. And then paste it in. All right, so don't worry about the position of this right now. And now let's come in and cut this one out. So Command X. Whoops. Paste it here, and we'll do the rest for the other ones as well. All right, so now using this frame, I'm going to Command D, create a new instance, come over here and then say detach the instance. So now this is no longer attached to a component, it's just a regular old frame. So what we can do is we can get this second illustration, drop it in here. Let's go ahead and rename this layer. And we can use this as a guide here. Now let's go ahead and move this frame just out so it's a little easier to see with the boundaries of it. And again, let's go ahead and set the max width to the frame and then we can center it. All right. So again, I'm going to move this back to this artboard, come in and then say create component. And I'm going to repeat this process for the other ones. This, using that frame as a kind of a crop, creating it as a component, and then repeating that twice for illustration 3 and 4. Now I'm just going to zoom or speed through this so you don't have to watch that in real time. All right, so now we have these illustrations as their own components, and we can do something really cool here, and that's called changing the instance of this. So let's come back to the home page here, for example. Come in and actually add this component. So in features, we'll bring in, go back to our home page here, and we'll bring in this style here. So you can see here is the style, and what we can do is come over to this instance, and Figma will see similar designs that are either named similarly or in like also the same size. So what we can do is say 2, 3, or 4. And we can repeat this for even more designs down the road, but for now we can cycle through the different illustrations all within the same instance component. So let's revert this back to 1, and I can see that this has the background from the frame showing. So let's come back to our master component. So let's go here, then go to master component. And on this frame, let's make sure that we're removing the background. So if we come back to our design, we can now see that that is transparent. And what we want to do is let's go ahead and just select this, Command G, we'll call this card info, and then we'll go ahead and center the card info on this background. So we need to make sure that this one is in here. So illustration, we can center that, and let's maybe just move it about right there. All right, so we have one more thing we want to do as far as the atoms is concerned, and that is this repeatable thing here, these little patterns. You can see that essentially it's the same size, just the position of these circles is different. And this process is actually going to be very similar to what we just did for the illustrations. So what we want to do is I'm going to come in and select this background here. So you can see that this is the green background. I'm going to Command D, and I'm going to use that as kind of like a kind of like a frame or a crop for that the little white little squigglies here or blobs. So let's go ahead and do that. Select this one and this, and we can call this just something like just 1. So that's And let's go ahead and Command X to remove that, come into our atoms page, paste this in. And what I want to do is I'm going to create a new frame here. And I'm going to call this, let's see, we'll do card shapes. Or maybe card textures would make more sense. All right, then we'll just drop this in here. I'm actually going to turn off the visibility of this background, or you know what, we can keep it so we can actually see it, because if we turned it off, you wouldn't be able to see it. We'll do that. These aren't really, the names of these aren't really important, so I'll just keep it the way it is. Come over here and then say create component. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing for the other 3 cards. And then I'm just going to speed through it so you can see the process and not have to watch it in real time as well. Now, one thing I want to stop really quickly and explain is you'll see that this size, you'll see the size of the frame, and then look at this one, it's bigger. And the reason it's bigger is because this has been transformed, but hasn't been reverted back, so this extra like size of the shape isn't being added to the size of the component. So what we can do here is we can right click and we can say flatten, And then that just reverts it. It's still a shape, but now it's like a shape that doesn't have that transform on it. It's then set to 0, as you can see right here. And now we can select this component, come up here and then resize that frame to fit. And now you'll see that it's the same 442 by 358. And it looks like the other ones, we have an issue with this one as well. So let's come up here and then say flatten, select this frame, resize it, and then that is now 442 by 3, looks like 359. So it looks like we have, it's off by a little bit, but we can go ahead and fix that. Okay, and then this one is good to go. All right, so now that we have that, we can essentially do the same thing with the illustrations, but this time we're going to be switching through the card textures. Now let's go ahead and space these out so they look nice. All right, nice and organized. All right, so now that we have the atoms finished, we can go ahead and move on to the molecules. So let's go ahead, add a new page here, call this molecules. Coming to our home page here. And a good example of a molecule will be this little card here. So let's go ahead and just Command X to cut that out, come into the molecules and then paste that in. And let's go ahead and create a new frame here. And on this one, we can give this a name of feature cards. So we can just drop that in here, make this a little bigger. For now, we'll resize this in just a second. And this one, we want to, it's already connected to the illustration, so we're good there. This one, card info, that's good. Oh, so we actually need to go back, and I thought I added all the atoms, but I think there's one I wanted to add, and that is this down here. So let's go ahead, copy this, come into our atoms. Let's come into our buttons. We'll just go ahead and just put this with the buttons. Paste that in. And we'll call this something like action link, I think is what I usually call these types of things. So action link. And then we can click and create a component. All right. So now that that's a component, let's go ahead and make sure that these are spaced nicely. All right. Now let's go back into the molecules. And what we want to do is we want to replace that atom that we just created with this learn more. So let's come into our assets here, down to our buttons, and then drag that action link in, and then go back to our layers, and then drag this right here. So we need to go ahead and make sure it's aligned. Whoops. All right, so that's aligned. Go ahead and lock that, and then we can get rid of that group and then turn this one back on. All right, and this is important because if we ever made changes to that atom, say for instance, we changed the color of the arrow, it would be reflected here in this molecule as well. So let's just go ahead and do that to show you why this is really important to do. So let's come into this arrow, we'll change it to pink, come back into the molecules, and you'll see that now it's reflected here. So you can imagine if you're doing this on a ton of projects, that this would save you a ton of time. So let's come back and revert this back to purple. Come back into our molecule. And the last thing we want to do here is we want to bring in the card textures here into this card. So what we want to do is come back into our assets. We'll come into our card texture. We'll bring in number 1 here. We'll align it. Come back into our layers and make sure everything looks right. We want this to be on top of the background. And let's go ahead and expand this instance and then turn off the visibility of that green. Now we had that green so we could see it in the atoms, but you can also just toggle the visibility off so this looks correct. And you'll see now that we have these instances right here for these textures. So I could quickly change it to texture 2, 3, or 4. And again, I could just turn this color off and you can see that that has been applied to the green card. Now we want to set that to 1, then turn off that visibility. And now we have a new atom with also, we have a new molecule with atoms part of the molecule. All right, so let's make sure that all this sounds good. So the background needs to be inside of the card, which it is. Illustration, card info, background 1. Cool. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and do create component. And we can go ahead and just move this 80 around. So we'll just do 80, then 80. Whoops. And then remove that. All right, so now what we can do is we can go back to the home page and we can replace all of these with the ones that were originally there, but we're essentially just using the same component, duplicating it 4 times, and then changing the instances of the illustration and the instance of the texture background. So let's go into our assets here, down to molecules, feature cards, drop that in. Let's go ahead and turn on our grid so we can see a little bit what we're doing. Okay, so that looks like it's aligned to this one. Okay, let's turn off our grid. And I'm actually just going to move this one out as just like a reference for the copy. Then I'm just going to go back to our layers. And then I'm just going to hold Alt, or excuse me, not Alt. I'm going to hold Option, drag out, and that's going to duplicate this. Let's go ahead and just rename these. So that's going to be 1, 2, and then we can come into the second one we just duplicated, change the instance to the second illustration. We can come in and change the background here to a different color. So that was going to be the purple. So let's go ahead and select the background, change it to purple. Let's come into our texture, and we can change that to the second one, and then make sure we turn off that background. And then we can go ahead and change the copy. So 24-hour access, and then I'll go ahead and just change the rest of the copy as well. And then we can just get rid of this original one because we have this now new molecule here. So let's go ahead and turn on our grid, make sure all that looks good. All right, so I'm just going to repeat the process for these other ones, but I'm just going to jump forward in the video. But all I'm doing here is I'm duplicating the instance of the component, changing the illustration, changing the copy, changing the texture background, and then changing the color. So it's really repetitive, and I just want to save you some time from watching this in real time. All right, so that is by far the most complicated component that we're going to be creating in this video. The rest of them are a lot more straightforward. Now, the next couple of molecules I want to create are some of these header styles here. So with this headline selected, I'm just going to go ahead and rename some of these layers. So let's call this one headline, or actually let's call this title. We'll move the button down, and then we'll call this one copy. Then what we can do is Command D to, or actually we want to create this as a component. So create component, Command D, Command X, come into our molecules, paste that in, and we'll create a new frame here. And we'll call this frame headlines. And actually rename this to 1, because this is our headline 1. And then we can drop it in here. And let's go ahead and just make this a lot bigger. We'll worry about the spacing in just a bit. Okay, so we have that. Let's go ahead and back to our home page. And another headline that I want to grab is this one. So we'll call this one headline, just so it's clear what it is in this layer. This is going to be our title. This will be our copy. Then we'll do create component. Command D, duplicate, cut out the component, come back to the molecules, paste it into the headline, rename this to 2, and do about 40 pixels. And I think there's a couple more that I want to grab. And the next one I want to grab is this features. So let's go ahead and come down here. I'm going to ungroup this. I'm going to move the features on top, call this one title, and call the other one copy. Okay, this will be number 3. We'll call this as headline so it's clear what it is on this page, and then we'll rename it to 3 in the actual molecule. So let's do create component, Command D, cut this one out, paste it in, and then rename this one to 3. All right, so that's everything for the headlines. We have the feature card, the headlines, and the next thing we want to do is nav links. So that's another easy one here. Let's come up to the top. Let's go ahead and just select these navs. Looks like there's already a group here, so we just call this nav links. Or actually just call it links. We'll do create component, Command D, cut the master out, come into our molecules, create a new frame here called navs, so plural. And even though there's one, I'm going to call it plural because it'll make more sense once our app grows and we have different navs. And we'll call this 1 for now. Actually, no, let's call it links because that's more descriptive in this case. And let's go ahead and move that 100 pixels from this one. And let's go ahead and resize this. All right, so now we have all of our molecules. Now let's move on to the last bit, which is creating the organisms, which is going to be a combination of atoms and molecules in order to create bigger components. So let's come in and add a new page here. We'll call this one Organisms. And in this one, let's come back to our design here. And one of the ones we want to include here is the nav bar. So on this nav already, if we select this, we have our icon button, we have the links, we have our main logo, and now we have this grouping called top. And let's just call this nav bar. Go ahead and create this as a component as well. So create component, Command D, cut out the master, come into organisms, paste it in there, and then you know what to do. We'll create a new frame. We'll call this frame nav bars. We'll rename this to main, and then drag it into our nav bars here. Then let's go ahead and resize this. And now if we come into assets, down to organisms, nav bars, we can see that here, and we can drag it anywhere into our project down the road. All right, so we have that designed. And the next thing I want to do is this here. So we have our header, we have this illustration. So let's rename this so it's a little more descriptive. We'll call this whole grouping, we'll just call it hero. Command, or actually no, don't Command D. We have to create a component. Command D, and then take the master and drop it into the organism here. Then we'll create a new frame. We'll call this one heroes. Rename this to 1 because this is hero 1. And then we can do the little auto layout trick so it centers it 80 pixels all the way around. And then we can get it nice and 100 pixels from that. All right, so now I think there's just one more thing we need to do here, and that is to make this one its own organism as well. So you can see right now it's grouped into this and it's a little disorganized. So let's do illustration. And I'm not sure. So it looks like this features here. I'm not sure what this is grouped into. Zoom out here. It's taken off something. So for whatever reason, our main nav is grouped into this card. That's kind of weird. So let's actually drag this out and we'll organize this in just a bit, but I just want to make sure that that wasn't in this grouping. We'll call this one background. Okay, so now what we can do is create a component and we'll call this one something like a feature card, I think would be a good name for this. So feature card. And we'll go ahead and duplicate that, remove that, and then paste it in here. And again, let's go ahead and create a frame for these. And let's go ahead and center it using the auto layout trick. So auto layout. And keeping everything nice and consistent, we'll move it 100 pixels from this one. All right, so let's double check, make sure everything looks good. So you can see there's a lot of purple here, which is good. That means we're using the components the way we should. And if we come in, yeah, so let's go ahead and group all of these together. And this features here, so Command G, call this entire thing features. So we have our main nav. We have these that are off the screen. We have our header. So let's go ahead and rename this. Or excuse me, not our header, but our hero. We have our feature card. And then we have our features. So let's go ahead and make sure that this is nice and organized. So this is going to be title. Let's organize these. So, whoops. All right, so this is the last one. Let's go ahead and create a component. Duplicate it. Remove this one. And we'll create a frame here. We'll call this one feature sections. Paste in our new designed component. We'll name this to 1. And then we'll go ahead and center it with auto layout. So 80, 80. And then move it so it's 100 pixels. And let's go ahead and go into our assets and just make sure everything's the way we expected it. So we have our atoms. We have our buttons. So we got 3 buttons there. Card textures, illustrations, we've got our logos, molecules, we got the feature card, headlines, navs, and organisms. We have our feature cards, feature sections, heroes, and our nav bars. So we did a lot here to kickstart this design system. But remember, the work here never really stops. We should be updating the design system as the project grows and changes, and using the components we've created to design new pages or component variations. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more design and development tutorials. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one.